Well, it's not yet retail results season, but one word will no doubt come up when they report third quarter results next month, and that is shrink. Inventory shrink can happen due to a host of reasons, but one has become most prevalent: crime. Walmart, Target, and Macy's are among the retailers calling out criminal organizations for hurting inventory levels over recent months. In August, Target CEO Brian Cornell said that he was facing, quote, an unacceptable amount of retail theft and organized retail crime. That same month, Walmart highlighted the complexity of the issue. CFO John David Rainey saying that it was still increasing, but was presenting unevenly across the country.
The cost is certainly mounting. The National Retail Federation's Retail Security Survey shows retailers lost $112 billion due to the problem in 2022. This is not a new issue. Over the last few years, the likes of Lowe's and Home Depot have increasingly been outspoken over it. New legislation looks to tackle the issue, but increasingly it seems that big business is taking matters into its own hands. Let's speak with one of those retailers now. We're joined by Scott Glenn, Home Depot's Vice President of Asset Protection. Also with us for the conversation, we've got Yahoo Finance's Diane King Hall. Scott, great to have you here to really kind of dive into this conversation. And for our viewers out there that listen into the Home Depot earnings call quarter after quarter, they hear from people like your Chief Financial Officer, Richard, saying that this has been a constant pressure over the last several quarters and even the last few years, and it's something that we are tackling every day. This is something that you are tackling every day. What would you say the state of tackling shrink right now is for a company like Home Depot and across the retail industry?
Yeah, good morning, guys, and thanks for having us on today. So appreciate your attention to this problem. Couple things that I would mention immediately. As you mentioned, shrink is a multifaceted component part. So there are certainly there's certainly a theft component to that piece of it. There's certainly an operational component to it. There's an unknown component to it. But certainly the organized retail crime piece, as you mentioned, has been growing in scale and breadth over the last several years. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but it's been putting more and more pressure on us, certainly over the last 5 to 7 years.
Scott, Diane here. You all had a big breakthrough recently with regard to the issue of shrink at your company, an individual and more than one individual that you are pursuing. Talk to us about the developments there with regard to that breakthrough. And I learned a new term in this process, offense. What is that?
Yeah, so I know you're referring to a recent case down in Florida. What I would say is less of a breakthrough and more of a illustration of what happens day in and day out. These cases are pretty typical of what we see both in the scale and the breadth of those cases. So recently, this case in particular, I don't want to get too much detail because it's actually still a pending criminal matter. But what you refer to as offense as a term, every organized retail crime basically has two components. And it has a booster group, a group of individuals that actually go into most of the stores and commit the crimes and procure the merchandise, for lack of a better term. And then who they turn it over to, which is the offense, the person that is kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes, that is orchestrating the events. Think about it as your traditional organized retail crime family, where you have people out there doing the work and then kicking up some of the component pieces of it, ultimately the profits, and then monetizing the products, reselling it, using it for other types of crimes, human trafficking, drugs, guns, you name it. There's all kinds of other kind of tentacles that happen relative to these types of organized crime cases.
Scott, do you think we've seen the worst of it?
Unfortunately, I don't. I think that the problem has been magnified a little bit over the last couple of years. We're getting the appropriate amount of attention on it. It's gotten the attention of not only the retail folks, but also law enforcement, politicians, and judges. But I think we're really kind of at the upslope beginning of this. And until we get critical mass across the country at the state, local, and federal level, we're not going to get this problem, kicked out anytime soon.
So what needs to happen then, Scott, to really address the issue? Especially, you said we're not at the peak of this problem.
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of this, right? I think people are starting to understand that this is not petty shoplifting. This is not something that, somebody's coming in and stealing a hammer from the Home Depot. These are folks that are stealing in mass, and that the crimes that these folks are monetizing and funding with the dollars that come from this touch many, many other areas that a lot of folks are very interested in. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, drugs, guns, human trafficking, other money laundering is certainly one that's out there. And I think as that starts to permeate through the US, as it starts to permeate through the justice system, people are starting to really understand how important and how critical it is for us to treat this problem seriously. As that continues to grab hold, we're going to see better controls around this process. We're going to see people that are held accountable at a much higher level across the board.
To what extent has this also had an impact on the relationship between retailers like yourself and Home Depot and some of the companies who you purchase wholesale from in order to move that inventory through your own retail footprint in stores, online, and brick and mortar?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two sides of it, right? There's the supply chain side of it, as you kind of refer to, and it certainly puts pressure on all of us in terms of keeping our shelves full, keeping product available for the customer, and continuing to fulfill that piece of it. And then there's the back side of it, as you mentioned, the online side of it, where not that we don't have a relationship with those folks, we do work with those folks, but we certainly think that the online resellers can and should be doing more to kind of police themselves to make sure that they're not a place where people can easily go out there and sell stolen property, frankly, at prices that are lower than the brick and mortar folks can in some cases buy it for.
And Scott, in terms of the solutions, what legislation do you want to see happen to help solve this problem, number one? And then number two, is there a cost that consumers will end up bearing as a result of shrink?
Yeah, of course. For part one, I mean, we're starting to get there in terms of local, state task forces. Many state attorney generals at this point have been a little bit out in front of this and kind of seeing the writing on the wall and putting task forces together, dedicated law enforcement folks, dedicated prosecutors, changing the outcomes that happen for aggregation and retail crime in general, and taking it more seriously. But certainly we want to continue to see more pressure similar to what was done last year and the implementation of the Informed Consumers Act. We want to see continuing legislation at the federal level around organized retail crime task forces, dedicated resources, and a dedicated agency, that can really kind of take the lead on this. Because right now, it's really for us retailers, it's whomever we can happen to go get to take this problem seriously is the one that will hopefully take this case and prosecute it. So we really need a much more coordinated and systemic effort at the federal level to take this problem seriously and really understand how much it impacts not only the financials of retailers and consumers, but also the safety and of the associates in our stores and the customers and the shopping public at large.
Scott, thanks so much for taking the time here today. Really important matter, and one that we're going to continue to track, especially as we go further into earnings season. Scott Glenn, Home Depot Vice President of Asset Protection, and Yahoo Finance's Diane King Hall joining for the conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you, guys.